Never mind. We have your shit. Just give us the money. We'll be gone.
You done dick teased the wrong queen, bitch. Please don't do this. You're gonna go to hell.
How did you get into filmmaking? I know you started out as a film photographer, and that kind of traversed into you getting into filmmaking. But instead of me kind of painting a broad brush
Yeah.
with that, I kind of want to know what made you want to get into that sort of thing.
Yeah. Well, I'd always been really fascinated and interested in telling stories, and writing stories, writing scripts, taking pictures actually started out as a way to sort of tell stories. With a stills camera, it felt a lot sort of more accessible and kind of easy, more than, this was before everyone had a 4K video camera in their pocket, and it felt like a sort of accessible way to do it. And so I had gotten a 35 millimeter film camera as a gift, and I just started taking pictures and sort of creating worlds in front of the camera. And I would do everything from kind of making the outfits to doing the hair and makeup, and building weird sets, and kind of doing it all. And I moved to New York right after high school, and got really into fashion. And I'd sort of been into fashion and magazines and sort of that world, because it seemed like there was, at the time, there was a lot of interesting storytelling happening in fashion. And it like the photography kind of took off in a way. Obviously I spent a lot of time and energy, and I worked really hard. And then so that when it did take off and start to go really well, I was like, okay, I'm on this ride. Like, this is, I'm gonna get to travel the world and meet really great people and work with amazing artists and get paid really well, hopefully. And all that stuff happened. And then it was like, sort of 15 years later, and I was like, but I haven't made a film yet. I haven't, embraced the idea of storytelling as fully as, I'd always wanted to. And that's when I made my first short film, which, then opened up a lot of doors. And sort of in the period after that, I sort of bounced back and forth between shooting stills for fashion magazines and advertising clients, and then doing films.
How was the creative process? I know before Swallowed there was The Ruins, right?
Yeah.
How was this creative process different from The Ruins, and how did you challenge yourself to go beyond that in terms of cinematography and story-wise? Because with The Ruins, you do this fantastic job of interweaving horror and suspense, I feel, and it's bold and it's deep. And what lies within The Ruins is the dark and the mysterious. And I see that we get a lot of that with Swallowed, where we play around with these bold and deep themes. And there is the dark and the mysterious within Swallowed as well, where we build up to the revelation of what these drugs really are.
Yeah.
And I feel like that makes up the essence of sort of what Swallowed is, while the other half is, survival horror. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think that, one of the biggest sort of things that I have been afraid of, and sort of the base fears, I think, is just the fear of the unknown. And, and that's and the fear of the unknown, which kind of, it can be equally as terrifying as fear of the known. Like in The Ruins, it's a fear of the unknown before they realize what's going on.
Of
And then once
course.
they realize what's going on, it's a whole other type of fear. And I think there's
Right.
something similar at work in Swallowed, where it's like, that you're in Swallowed, it's like, the situation is sketchy, and there's, that something's not right. And like, there's a lot to feel uneasy about.
Hmm.
But it's only after a certain point when they sort of realize what they've done, that it's like the fear turns into something else.
Right.
And I think that it's fun to like play around with switching up, what to be afraid of. Like
Hmm.
in Swallowed, there's, you can be afraid of the situation you're in. They can be afraid of what it is that they've swallowed, and then Mark Patton's character Rich shows up, and he gives you something completely new to be afraid of, because
Of
he's
course.
unhinged and like a wild card that you sort of didn't see coming. So it's definitely something that I like to play around with.
I definitely feel like what you were saying, there is a greater unknown and a deeper purpose of, especially again, where we're talking about this buildup of a certain, I want to say there's a sort of different type of enemy where we introduce what the drugs are, because
Yeah,
it's not something that's physical, it's something that, you know, we're ingesting into our bodies. And, it's something that takes control within the second half of the film, where you are fighting for survival, and it's
yeah,
not something that you can, like I said, physically control.
yeah,
I do want to get into the second half of the question here. I feel like Swallowed is one of those unique films, or experiences rather, where it's not just the cast of the characters, but it's the interactions with the characters that I feel is really the crux of the film. Um, where these innocent interactions in the beginning of the film, sources of comfort, and these things such as intimacy and touch, and sort of this relationship that kind of never really quite gets off the ground, all becomes heightened within moments
yeah,
of, you know, just this drug run that kind of just sort of turns chaotic within the moments of this film. Um, these moments sort of become a tool of survival, of sort of life and death. It changes the dynamic of things within like the drop of a dime. It's very subtle, but I feel it heightens the terror in many ways in this film.
yeah. Well, you have to care about the characters that you're watching, and you have to understand,
Hmm.
where they are emotionally with each other, and
Hmm.
sort of, because it's not really enough to be at in peril physically. I feel like
Hmm.
I think that for an audience to become invested in them, and even for as a writer and a director and an actor, like, everyone involved has to sort of understand and be invested in where they are emotionally. And that was, and that's tough to do in a story where, basically we've got like one scene with them before shit goes down. And there was a lot of heavy lifting sort of built into that scene. And that scene was probably the scene that I rewrote the most, because I felt like it was, I knew what I wanted to be set up there. And and I knew that it was a lot of weight to put on one scene, and that if I didn't pull it off, then a lot of the rest of the movie wasn't going to work.
No, I definitely felt that. Like it, it almost feels like there's a sense of innocence in the beginning of the film where, these two are trying to figure out, like, yes, we could tell that there's a sense of closeness between
Yeah,
these two, but they're still trying to figure out what that means.
yeah, and it
And
means
you,
maybe something different to each one of them, and like it doesn't
right,
have to mean the same thing to both of them. And I
of
think that
course.
there is something like kind of fascinating about, like, the those strange lines that they're walking between, intimacy and friendship, and
Hmm.
companionship and emotional intimacy and physical intimacy, and all the stuff that you know all of us have sort of dealt with at one point or another.
Right. And I feel like I think within the outstretches of horror, it's different in this case as opposed to, like a romance film or any other genre. I think those tendencies kind of get heightened because, again, within the outstretches of the rest of the film, all of these interactions that they will not be able to experience later are sort of tested, and then also they are having to do things that they wouldn't normally have to do within normal circumstances. And I feel like
Yeah.
you feel for these characters.
Good. Well, I'm glad you felt like that. I mean, I think that the big thing, I started out with, I didn't start out with, the sort of the idea of a, sci-fi thriller, body horror. Like, I started out with a love story, and I started out with two characters and what that complicated relationship might be, and what was a position that I could put these two in that would be the most horrific, most uncomfortable, most, sort of confronting dilemma that they could face
Right.
on this last night together. And so the story sort of grew from there.
I think also we were talking about Rick, right?
Yeah.
I think we can talk about this because, like I said, there's two different dynamics between Dom and Benjamin, and then Rick and Benjamin, because we get these, like I said, these sweet kind of tender moments with him and Benjamin, and then we segue into these very tense, very uncomfortable, moments with Rick.
Yeah.
And even though Rick has this sort of campiness to him where you kind of want to
he's a showman. Like, he's got a bravado. He's a showman, and he loves being the center of attention. And there's a lot about him that is very showman-like.
Right. But then there's this underlying darkness to him where you know what's about to happen in these scenes, and I think that's what creates this tension. But what I love,
unstable. He's definitely like a wild card.
Right. And what I love about Benjamin is that even though throughout these points of the film there's fear there, and I like with any traditional film or with any traditional horror film, there's always going to be fear, but I feel like fear creates the hero, right, within horror.
Yeah.
But with Benjamin, I feel like his cunning wit and his sexuality is what takes that power back within
100%.
these scenes.
100%. And that was something that I was very conscious of from the beginning. I liked the idea that Benjamin is, as a queer protagonist, like he's not, he's not troubled by this or conflicted by this. Like, he's very comfortable in who he is, and and sort of doesn't have the same issues with his queerness that a lot of times is what is at the center of stories like this. And I loved the idea that for him, finding his sort of strength and power, like that is what sort of allows him to manipulate the situation and survive as long as he can.
Right. What was it like to film these kinds of scenes? Being that, the characters, were so different from each other, and then having to film these kind of tense scenes.
Yeah, it was, it's as tense as you can imagine. We were a very small crew, and a lot of the more graphic, tense stuff happens in that cabin.
Of course.
And it's a very small cabin. It's a very small crew. So we were very much like a family. I mean, it's cliche to say, oh, we were like a family on this shoot, but like, it really does, ring true, because we were, 8 people total. And so like, imagine being in that room when this stuff is happening, there are as many people in front of the camera as there are behind the camera,
Of
so
course.
it really is intimate. And that, I think, helps a lot with performance and with, spontaneity. And, we were able to, my DP, Alex, Wolf Lewis, who's amazing, he had a background in documentary work.
Hmm.
And so like, the actors had this freedom to like go wherever they wanted, and he was reactive and sort of was used to sort of following the action, which was, a skill that came in really handy when, when you really want to make sure that it doesn't end up feeling stagey or, that's the challenge when you're in one location for, a great length of time.
A lot of this came together so very well, and like just from how everything starts to how everything finishes, I think you do such a good job of portraying very real characters and
Oh, good.
their very real emotions with this type of situation. And I think we need to have more films like this, not just with these characters, but just more unique experiences like this, because we don't have them.
Yeah.
And I think you're definitely setting the trail, or trailblazing rather, a genre that is something that we do need more of. Um, we have the ruins and now we have Swallowed. What's next for you? What do you feel is next for you now that you've tackled both of these projects?
Well, there's also I made a film called Jamie Marks is Dead, which is
Mm-hmm.
on Shudder, and I think it's on Amazon Prime at the moment, which is like a high school ghost story. And then
Mm-hmm.
I made a film also called Midnight Kiss, which is on Hulu, which is a queer slasher. Um,
Okay.
but late last year, I made a film called The Passenger with Blumhouse, which will be coming out later this summer.
Nice.
Sort of end of
Okay.
August, beginning of September. And it's a, it's not straight up, it's not really horror, it's a thriller for sure, but it's a coming of age hostage road trip thriller.
I'm
Um,
so
and that's all,
excited.
so that's completely done and ready to go. And it stars Kyle Gallner, who's incredible, and Johnny Birchtold, and that's a fun one. So now that, like, that's basically 2 movies in one year, which is amazing. And
Hmm.
so now I'm sort of just trying to figure out, what's next. If I want to go the, sort of micro budget indie route again and make another film like Swallowed, or, do something a little bigger. I'm just kind of open at the moment.
Now I'm really excited to see all of these films, because like I said, you are a very talented and very unique storyteller, and we need more storytellers like you within our arsenal of horror. And I want to thank you for coming onto Horror DNA, not only sharing your story, but digging deep into Swallowed and sharing with us what makes this film so special with us.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me. I mean, I think that it's great. I mean, Swallowed is such a small little film, and was very much a labor of love from day one. And so, any opportunity and any platform that wants to help me get the word out about the film, I'm just so grateful that people are finding it and are responding to it like they have. It's really been kind of amazing.